Definitely start thinking about being honest with how big you think your brand should be and what your level of expansion and drops and how much you're putting out into the world. Are you filling an actual void? Are you really finding something that's a niche in the market that people really need, or are you just sort of, this is a self-expression project? Think about your sourcing of your materials. There are amazing options, like you mentioned. What you're able to create with things that already exist can be really amazing. So definitely, I think about all of those things before you start creating and making orders for more stuff to exist.
Thank you so much for tuning in this Friday for our IG Live Sustainability and Consumer Goods with Marie Claire's Julia Gall. I'm Natasha Berg. I'm a founding board member of Oceanic Global, and I work across all things communications and partnerships. We are launching this IG Live series today with Julia in celebration of Oceanic Global's new industry standard, Blue, which empowers businesses of all sizes to eliminate plastics, adopt sustainable operating plastics practices, and protect our blue planet. Today, we'll be speaking with Julia Gall, my longtime friend and colleague, style director at Marie Claire, who, in addition to being a thought leader in the world of sustainability, is a low-waste convert herself and environmental advocate. Today, we'll be talking about not only sustainability in consumer goods, but the importance of establishing a universal benchmark as a way of eliminating greenwashing and how our standard is helping provide consumer-facing seals that make it easier for individuals to navigate what products are truly vetted for sustainability and fully plastic-free. So without further ado, let me bring on Julia.
And hi.
Hi, I'm really excited that we're having this conversation today. Julia, you and I met many moons ago when I was working in style and fashion and accessories PR, and you were at Marie Claire leading the way, as you always do, and recently reconnected last year when we were working together on a story on sustainability and low waste living around Earth Day.
Yeah.
And I know that we both had our sort of individual journeys during that time that brought us to where we are today, but could you just tell our audience, especially from the Oceanic Global side, who may not be as familiar with your work, a little bit about your role at Marie Claire and how you sort of found your way into sustainability?
Totally. Well, I have recently become the style director of Marie Claire. Basically, I, kind of oversee all fashion related content for our website. And it has been a really fun journey to kind of, understand my values as a person and a citizen of planet Earth, and kind of seeing how I can intersect them with what I do for work, which is, obviously look at all of the different designer collections, talk about, fashion news and things that are happening in the fashion sphere, but also provide our readers with amazing, shopping choices and things like that, which obviously can kind of go hand in hand with sustainability too, because, I do see, while it's very important for me to talk about the best and coolest and most beautiful things, that are in the fashion sphere, I think it's really important to also be able to provide your readers with sort of the knowledge of how to put them together, how to take care of those purchases. So we're not, kind of talking about, over consuming, but also shopping smarter, shopping, kind of investment pieces with luxury fashion and sort of understanding why things are inherently expensive in the luxury space, but also understanding that, with those purchases, you are taking on a responsibility of upkeeping them. And if you do it properly, you could have them for, decades and, generations and things like that. So I think it's important, if you are somebody in the fashion space who cares about sustainability, to understand that there are many ways to talk about fashion that aren't just, buying more things or buying the sustainable capsules for things. And because that's, over consuming and shopping is not the most sustainable practice, but I think, you can enjoy fashion and you can be able to be a smart consumer if you're just armed with that information. A few years ago, I kind of challenged myself for the month of April to sort of just keep an eye on my plastic consumption and really understand, what I was taking on. And I kind of documented it on my personal Instagram, which was fun and funny. And it really was an eye-opening experience. And I felt like, I took for granted, I think, the recycling system. I take for granted, what you kind of say yes and no to, like when you're on a plane or, at a press event for, what I do in fashion. Obviously, I was super excited to talk to you about, the seal today, because as I'm a consumer, just trying to understand what products actually aren't in plastic packaging is a real journey. And it doesn't always say online, like, what the packaging is made out of. I've been bamboozled many times, or you buy something in a, cardboard box and it's wrapped in plastic inside, and that always drives me nuts. So like, I think this transparency and understanding that the seal really does, hold up to what the standards are that I want to shop is super important. It's going to be a game changer for everybody.
Thank you. Yeah, we're really proud of what we've put together. And honestly, what the Blue Standard is as a whole is a collection of learnings that we've put together and best practices and solutions and paths forward that we've found from talking to business owners and industry leaders and industry insiders like yourself about the challenges that they found along their journeys and their day-to-day work, and how can we collect that and make it easier for other individuals that are following in your footsteps, for example, to try to adopt these practices within their own lives and bring them into their industry as a whole. So we are really, really excited to be able to bring together like a lot of those different elements, as well as something that you and I talked about yesterday, end-of-life strategy and how that's being communicated. Like, even if you do have a product that is plastic and aligns with your values, if recycling is not working and recycling systems are fundamentally broken in certain sectors, like, how can you actually get rid of that in a responsible way? So the seal is looking at that across the board. But I want to go back to sort of your personal journey, because I know within the fashion space, you had shared with me that this was sort of a new topic that you were introducing at the time to like many of your colleagues. So how was it received when you started sharing this journey with your colleagues, when you started talking to different editors and industry leaders in the sphere about wanting to implement more of these practices or cover more of these types of stories?
I think people were sort of like, this is kind of crazy, like just my level of documentation and how much I was like, oh no, I like messed up today, and like sort of that. But it definitely sparked conversation. I do think like just constantly talking about it is the only way it really does program into people's brains. And then I, was able to host a event with a brand that, they were really like, oh, we love that you're talking about this. We want to kind of host the sustainable capsule breakfast. We'd love if you could join. And it actually was an amazing roundtable conversation in the end, that we kind of all made a pact together and decided that we would write an open letter to fashion PRs and brands saying, hey, like, you should be really mindful about the packaging that you're sending giftings in, and also unsolicited giftings that include sometimes samples of like the wrong size, or just like things that I would never want to wear or include. I think having that open letter, which was just on our Instagrams, but got picked up by WWD and a few other news outlets. And it was kind of like a, like a small step, but it definitely got people thinking in the industry. Also then, whoever's making the decisions at the brand can kind of be like, well, maybe gifting isn't the best strategy, or maybe we are producing too much. And, what can we do to change to make that a bit better? Because obviously people are asking for it, and people like me, so.
I want to say I've had a lot of conversations with some of the brands that we work with through Blue, and some of like the bigger institutions that house other brands underneath them, about looking at that as a whole, not just like gifting product from a PR perspective, but do we still want to do gift with purchase, or is that going to be inherently wasteful? Is there a way around that, or are there practices around even like gift wrap and packaging and things that don't necessarily need to be included that might ultimately end up in landfills? And I think the groundswell that you're creating by using that as a teachable moment with each of the brands that you're talking to, and I fundamentally believe, Oceanic also fundamentally believes as an organization, that you want to inspire people to act differently by showing them why you care, instead of like shaming or telling them what they shouldn't be doing, or why you can't accept it, or like how it doesn't align like fully. Like, you want to just encourage and teach. And I think that's really the only way that people can listen. I'm wondering first, in your general journey to going low waste outside of recycling, and the disappointment that sometimes those infrastructures may be, what were some of the biggest challenges, the biggest learnings, the biggest takeaways that you have from that process of eliminating plastics within your own life?
I just felt like in the beginning, I was kind of like, okay, my first step is like, I'm going to just like use up everything that I have, like anything that's in a plastic container, let me use up, and then like figure out then, okay, what do I actually really need? And I think like, this also speaks to fashion too. It's like going through and really understanding like, what do you want? And then what do you need? Like, there's a very big difference, I think, between those two. And it's really hard, I think, because we're constantly being marketed to. You kind of know your go-tos as you go along, and then you kind of fill the voids. And like, yes, it's a lot of research. Yes, it's kind of daunting. But I think once you get into your groove of it, like, there are really great brands. I think start with what you really need. And I think if you want to start becoming more plastic free, just go through everything, you use up everything you have first, and then really assess like, okay, did I need 14 shades of like a eyeshadow? Do I need this? Am I using this all the time? So I think that's the hardest part of the transition, is really just slimming down and then finding like your kind of like your VIPs. And then, you know, in terms of fashion, it's like the best thing you can do is really shop secondhand. I think that to know something is already in circulation is sort of like the best way to start. And I think if you need to buy something new going forward, like you should really assess what your best options are. I think just if you want to bring in something new, understand that once you bring it into the world, you've brought it into the world. It will have to have an afterlife, and understanding that responsibility is super important.
Right. Right. And that's a challenge that I think a lot of people within the fashion space always encounters, because you want to also allow people to express themselves and have this creativity and create things that are fundamentally new and unique to them. But what's really been inspiring me recently is seeing how many brands are adopting and implementing take back programs and circularity, and really making that a core part of their narrative as well. With all of these brands now realizing that sustainability is not just a niche, it's a need, like we need to take action, consumers are demanding it. Have you seen any sort of, I don't want to say like horror stories, but any good intentions that may or may not have gone wrong, like a sustainability initiative that maybe wasn't actually creating the impact that it was striving to, or was ultimately creating more harm than good? Because I think there still is so much room for education. A lot of people within brands themselves aren't sustainability experts. And I think that's something that we've also found in working with these brands and guiding them step by step, is the amount of information and advice and guidance that's out there, and the lack of this sort of verification and benchmark and accountability system allows sustainability to be like a free-flowing world. So I would be curious, like, what have you seen that's kind of been a faux pas?
As a fashion journalist, I get pitched sustainable lines, capsules, you know, collections and things all the time. And like, you know, I hate to be playing devil's advocate here, but I think like there's no such thing as a sustainable capsule. Like, if you're making something new, that's not sustainable. It just isn't. I think if you are a brand and you're using a capsule as sort of like a way to figure out how to change your supply chain for the long term, I think that is a great step. I think to use it as a marketing tool is a misstep. I do commend brands who are thinking about it and want to make that effort for their supply chain and want to sort of figure out if they're able to kind of produce less and produce things better using these findings from their capsule collections. I don't know. I want to be optimistic and say, yes, I think a good step is a great step forward regardless, but I don't think, you know, making more and calling it sustainable is actually sustainable.
I think that's a really big piece of this narrative as well, especially from the fashion perspective, which is how do we actually hold brands accountable if they are creating something new?
It's a hard question, because I think that, you know, this industry supports a lot of people and makes a lot of money and has a massive infrastructure, and it's really hard to disrupt it by saying we have to make less. Now, does that mean like there are better ways to do it? 100%. Generally, overall, I think all brands should really take a deep and hard look about how much they're producing and consuming. And I think fashion media is completely poised to be a part of this conversation and be really honest about it. I definitely think that, you know, we all are responsible, from the consumer to the media, to the brands. We all play a part in this, and we really do need to work together. And if we want to fix this, like, we have to be able to start saying really no, and really the hard questions, and understanding like, you know, is it necessary to produce this much? Are you meeting your goals? We all just need to be much more mindful and actually like implement this in our everyday practices, whether you're a journalist or whether you're a consumer, and just be smarter.
Right.
Getting people on a higher level to start thinking about it and understanding it, and not just like, I hate to say it, putting our heads in the sand about it. And I think we're at a point where like, that's just unacceptable. I don't think, you know, we're allowed to just ignore that this is a massive problem, and figuring out like, again, like how to keep the industry afloat, but make it better. And everybody talking about it and making their own strides in their own way, I think is so important and so absolutely necessary at this moment. So.
And you just hit on two of the things that are going to lead me to my last question, but are also like fundamental pillars of the communications that we use around Blue, which is our ultimate goal. Like if we take a step back outside of just like provide industry solutions at scale, is how can we re-envision our relationship with the planet in a way that is in balance? How can businesses exist in a way that sustains the natural world, that sustains the businesses? Like, how do we create businesses and balance between them that sustain that which sustains them ultimately?
I think, you know, brands that already exist need to fix it. And I keep hearing like, we're too big, the supply chain is too far gone. There is definitely a call to action for consumers to really understand the actions that you make and to be vocal with the brands. I mean, there's Instagram, you have a platform. Like if you want to literally like comment on an Instagram of a brand and say, I don't like, I heard you do this. I heard, you know, you burn your samples, like put it out there. Power to the people. I think that's important. And I think that fashion media also has a massive responsibility in doing this as well. However, I just think that the supply chains have to break at some point. I think 2020 and obviously the global pandemic, like shifting the urgency of understanding where your supply chain begins and ends, I think was a real wake-up call to a lot of manufacturing in fashion media, and a lot of consumers were only really concerned with like the product as it arrives to us. And I think there needs to be a bit more of a deeper understanding, which brands never want you to know about as a consumer or a member of the media, which is how do they arrive to us? Like who's making them? Where is the material coming from? Who, and more importantly, who's impacted by the, you know, the processes of making these things. And I have to say, I'm already feeling like I'm seeing it on the media side, but I just think that, you know, thinking about all the amazing technology that people are putting into with different alternative materials and processes of how to, you know, make amazing things, and regenerative agriculture for cotton and things like that is really, really exciting to me. And I just think there needs to be much more awareness and also much more applaud to the brands who are really trying really hard to like do the right thing, and also being able to share that information, to share those resources so everyone could have a piece of the pie. Because at the end of the day, sustainable practices shouldn't be like a company secret that you hold, you know, close to your chest. It should be something we all are sharing from top to bottom. Whether your brand can afford it or not, it's a different thing. But like, you know, just to know that everyone has access to those findings and the research, I think is so important.
Yeah, and that's something that we've also always embraced, is the idea that impact should be open source, and we really need collaboration if we actually want this to happen at scale. So first, what have you seen within the realm of fashion and accessories and style that is giving you hope, that's like really inspiring you, that's making you think, wow, maybe there can be a future that's balanced between the fashion world and the planet? And then what are some of the last one I'll say is like, what are some of like your favorite brands or your favorite like sustainable swaps or things that we can go check out?
Well, if you're trying to make money and you're trying to sell something and you're trying to do this, nobody is perfect. There's always going to be a shipment that gives a carbon footprint. There's always going to be something, unless you were literally like finding the materials in your backyard, making it in your basement, selling it only in your 100-foot radius. Like maybe that's what it is. But like that is it's very small. And I love small, amazing brands, especially in the beauty space. I know I listed a few before. But I love, you know, High Bar shampoo is like one of my favorite things. It is truly my favorite shampoo. And luckily my local grocery store has been stocking it, so I don't have to ship it anymore. I can just buy it from them right there. And I love Do Mighty. It's a solid serum that's just the bar. And I think they're doing an amazing thing. And Tiffany is the founder there. She worked for many different beauty brands and, you know, big corporations, and kind of saw those problems in the supply chain, saw the problems with packaging, and said, you know what, I'm taking matters into my own hand and making a product that is really going to work. So, you know, for beauty, those are like things that I think are absolutely wonderful. And I think, you know, if you want to ever go down that path, like there are amazing small brands who do this. In terms of fashion, you know, I think you can buy the most amazing things on The Real, on Poshmark, on ThreadUp, like there's just, and Fashion File, there's so many, Rebag, like it goes on and on and on. And you can buy a quality piece of clothing that's in incredible condition. And I think that's genius. I think it's sort of, that gives me hope. I think there's a lot of optimistic, information here and many optimistic choices. I think we just have to do a better job of making sure we're committed to them.
So if you were to give brands now that either are up and coming or already existing, one piece of advice from all of your learnings and everything that you've come across within this journey and what you see day in and day out from businesses trying to adopt sustainability, like one piece of advice as how to take this approach, or it could be two pieces of advice, because I know that's a massive question. What would you tell them about like where to start or what they can do to ensure that they're making this investment in the right way?
I think, always think about packaging and think about, what's a better way to do it. Connect with smaller brands and kind of, again, share that information. I think it's so important that, brands also support one another and it's not so competitive. Everyone's kind of in their own lane. So there's no point to not share that information. But I think definitely start with packaging and definitely start thinking about being honest with how big you think your brand should be and what your level of expansion and drops and how much you're putting out into the world and what you think is actually, are you filling, I hate this, it's kind of a dark comment, but are you filling an actual void? Are you really finding something that's a niche in the market that people really need, or are you just sort of, this is a self-expression project? Think about your sourcing of your materials. There are amazing options, like you mentioned, Queen of Raw and Fab Scrap, who have access to so much dead stock fabric, and work with them and find what you can, find the things you can find there. You don't have to create, an order for something that doesn't exist. There's so much fabric out in the world. There's so many materials out in the world. So be creative. What you're able to create with things that already exist can be really amazing. So definitely, I think about all of those things before you start creating and making orders for more stuff to exist.
Designing something sustainably and self-expression sustainably actually adds to the challenge. It's going to make it even more creative because you have solutions along the way. And I think that's the way that we need to approach essentially sustainability as a whole is that it's a challenge, but the outcome when we get it right is really beautiful and it is optimistic. And what we're always constantly trying to do is to take those learnings like you shared and provide those solutions open source, as you had called out earlier as well. So I really appreciate this conversation. I could keep talking to you all day.
Me too, but I don't think anyone wants to watch us keep talking, yamming on it. But I will say, I am so proud of what you guys are doing, and the seal is so amazing. You guys have done the groundwork and have really been so regimented about what this seal really means and what it stands for. And I think that it's super optimistic to me, and I'm really excited to kind of see where it goes.
I think it's all been made possible by individuals like yourself, like I said yesterday, who've shared their journeys and worked with us on building out these resources and provided these solutions. And it's just going to continue to grow, and we're really excited to get it out there to the world. So thank you again so much. I appreciate you taking the time, and thank you to everyone who tuned in. You can follow Julia for more insight on her work in the realm of fashion and sustainability, as well as her personal journey as a low-waste convert, as she describes herself.
Yes, I'm a convert. I'm not perfect. I'm putting it out there. I'm just on this journey, just like everybody else. So thank you again for having me. It was really, really fun to chat, and always good to spend time with you. So
wonderful. You as well. Thank you so much. If anybody also wants to check out the resources that we were discussing with the Blue Standard, the product and packaging seal, or if you work with a different business or industry or school or system that you would like to adopt more sustainable practices, or to celebrate the practices that some of the organizations that you're a part of have already put in place, Oceanic Global is here to help. We have free open source resources, hand-by-hand consulting, as well as a verification system that adds credibility and celebrates sustainability achievements for brands of all scale. So please do check us out. And otherwise, we'll be continuing the series with other industry experts in the coming weeks.